decide that cloth is your medium?
I started 40 some years ago as a traditional quilter, and quilting actually saved my life because I was a stay at home mom and my husband worked all the time. So I had two toddlers at home, and I went to a group called MOPS, or Mothers of Preschool Children, at the local church. And it was actually my lifeline to get out of the house and talk with other adults. So through MOPS, a quilting group invited me to join them. I knew nothing about quilting. I didn't grow up with it. So I think I was about 22 years old, and this group of women were wonderful. We still meet today, 40 some years later. So I started traditional patchwork and did that for about 20 years. And then suddenly one day I thought, I can't follow another person's pattern. I have to sing my own song. So I started on the road to art quilting, and then started with surface design. It took off to surface design and dyeing and thread work. I call myself a one-trick pony, where I only do fiber. I don't do anything else. But within the realm of fiber, I love to experiment. So that's my story in a nutshell.
In your statement, you're saying that you improvise a lot, although you do use sometimes very detailed sketches.
Yes, it runs the gamut. So I can take you to my wall and show you a couple of different. There we go. So starting over on this side, this is some dyeing I did with snow last week. And I was actually looking for a very blue sky and with a little bit of rose. Oh, hi, Dolly. And that's not what I got. So improvising with this particular panel, to me, it looks like something you would see in Yellowstone National Park, some kind of earth centered. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. I had no green in my dye palette. So to me, it looks very earth centered. So I'll have to figure out what to do with that. So that's my improvisation. This piece, I drew a template, and started to piece some buildings. Some of them, for example, this black and white piece, that is, or this black and white piece fabric, that is not pieced, whereas this is. So you can, I think, essentially fool the eye with mixing both of those. But this was definitely drawn out in a pattern. This is my one of my sunflowers. I have about a dozen of these. They're fairly large. I'm starting to work in a little bit of a dimensional realm. This is, I'm in a group called Four Common Corners, and we create two themes. This was the theme of water. So I tied white fabric and dyed it, and this is what I got. And again, it reminded me of water lilies. So that's how this piece came to be. And then lastly on my wall is a little bit more foray into some dimensional work. This is called I Have a Hole in My Heart. So you can see that there. And this was created in just one day after losing my beloved kitty very recently. So that was, it's quite heartfelt to me. These are little thoughts and patterns and notes to myself. What about the story that I'm trying to tell or what I'm trying to express. So when I get a little bit stuck, I will come to my wall. And I have a studio assistant here and another one over here. This piece is actually quite large, so it's folded in half currently. And it's a little bit of a social commentary, and it's going to be called Purple People. And if you're not on one side or the other, you are sort of in the middle. Where do you live? What happens with the purple people? So I think probably all societies and cultures have people that feel like they don't fit in. Where do I go? Where do I belong? So that is my difference between improvisation and serious planning.
Do you also dye your fabric? Because it looks like it's been dyed.
Yes, I do dye most of my fabric. Mm-hmm.
How do you choose your colors?
Well, the purple people was pretty easy. I guess it depends on what I have going on in my mind and what I'm wanting to achieve. So if I'm looking for something that's earth-based, I will actually often go out and into the yard and bury the piece or find some rusted objects and lay them on my piece of fabric so that it's really in touch with the earth. Much of my work is a testament or an honoring of the earth that we live on. And in fact, my piece that is going to be exhibited in France is called Big Blue. And that came from the inspiration was the Apollo 13 spacecraft way back in 1972, who were in outer space and looked back at our Earth and said, we live on a big blue marble. And it's a very finite Earth and we have to take care of it. And so my core belief system springs from that.
You also mentioned spirituality. What do you mean by spirituality?
For me, spirituality is harmony, walking in harmony with people that I live with or in my community or people that are on the other side of the world. It's honoring everyone and where they're at in their particular walk in their life. It's honoring all life forms and beings. So we do, for example, some rescue work with a dog rescue. It's really being very much in touch with whatever my belief of a higher power is and honoring what somebody else has as their belief system.
How would you say that quilting evolved in the 4 decades that you have been practicing quilting?
For quite a few years, I touched on it. I was a traditional quilter and raising two small children. So I would say that maybe in those 20 years, condensed, there were years that I didn't produce at all because life was busy. I worked, I was a mom and a wife. So not a lot got done in some of those years. But as I progressed in my life, more of my internal dialogue started to emerge in my work. And I finally started to call myself an artist maybe about 10 years ago because it's very difficult to claim. I don't have an art degree or background, but felt like if I make something original, that's my art. And that's part of my story. And I hope that people would honor what I'm trying to relay as information from my experience. Yeah.
Quilting, I find that it requires a bit of a math background. How's your math?
Oh, Well, let's just say I keep trying until I get it right. I make some mistakes, and sometimes they're happy mistakes. I'm not a great mathematician by any stretch of the imagination.
Let's talk about the palette because I noticed that you have quills that are vibrant, radiant, and others that use more earth tones.
Mhm. Sometimes it depends on what the theme is. So if I'm working on an earth-centered theme, I will go there. Sometimes I think that some of my life will enter that. So if maybe I'm going through a more quiet period, for example, I will use more earth tones. But oh my gosh, I love those bright colors and the black and whites that make them pop, and just trying different things. I also believe very much in reusing fabrics and repurposing fabrics. So, for example, I have a number of quilts in a series called Tree Rings. And in in that palette are my neighbor's husband's shirt who passed away, just as an example. Military uniforms. You can use just the smallest thing in the tree rings type of quilt. And how tree rings came about was it was a call for the wisdom of trees. And so we have a wood pile on our property. I went and sat in the wood pile because I thought, I don't know what to do with this theme. So I sat with the wood for a long time and I frotaged on the ends of the cut wood and saw how they acted and behaved as they dried through their natural sort of death cycle, and created a piece that I dearly love, and also really love to teach it because people actually come away after one day with a small piece of finished work. And it's fun, it's freeing, and you can use just about anything that you can imagine in creating that piece.
Let's talk about the tools. Some quilters use long arm sewing machines. So what do you use?
I love to touch the fabric. So I will mostly quilt on my domestic sewing machine. I do have a mid arm, it's a handy quilter. And throughout the years, we have not been good friends. So we're trying to become friends again because I'm working on some larger pieces and I need that extra space. I created a piece about 86 high by just the width of fabric, about 45, 46. That is super bulky. So it went on the long arm. And I actually entered it into AQS Paducah, which I'll find out about tomorrow. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's a whole cloth piece that has a lot of color. Yeah.
You mentioned Paducah, and that's very important because you've been an artist in residence 5 years in a row, except for the pandemics.
Exactly. Yes. I love it. It's oh, Kentucky. It smells very different than where I live. It's lush and green, and in April, all the flowers are blooming, and it smells like the earth. It smells so beautiful. Whereas where I live, we live in a high desert area, and we have a lot of cactus, and we don't have that lushness. So I do have family from there. So I think that there's something in my genetic code that just really enjoys being there. Plus, it's an artsy town, and being there for 5 years now, I've met the neighbors and we've become friends. And other ladies will often join me in the studio, so it's very much a community time. And I will be back there in April.
You are also a teacher.
Yes. Yes, I didn't start out to be a teacher. My background is in human resources and local government. But a guild asked me a number of years ago if I wouldn't mind coming and teaching. So I thought, well, I can do this. And I actually had a really good time. It was fun meeting all the people in the class and seeing where they're at in their creative journey was very enlightening. And we all actually learned from one another. And that's what I find in all of the classes that I've now taught is we really gain as much from each other as I get to share in my experience. I do have 3 classes that I teach pretty routinely, and I'm writing a 4th, and the 4th is about storytelling. So the lecture that accompanies that is storytelling through quilts from the 1700s to present. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And then so the workshop will be, how do you tell your story? Why is that important at this time? What do you really want to convey? And you can accomplish that either in fabric or in collage. So it's kind of a multimedia class.
You told me that you have 2 children and now they are grown-ups. Are they quilting?
They are not. My sons are 45 and 43 right now, and they're very artistic in their own ways, mostly musically. So they're off doing their own thing, but they are not quilters. My life partner, however, is a quilter.
We're seeing more and more men joining women in quilting and patchwork.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I actually sent my partner Rick to long arm class, thinking that maybe he would enjoy it, but nah, not so much. So he makes more small works, and I like the larger works. Quilting can be insular. So within the fiber arts community, if we don't reach out and look at other ways of creating, I think we can get too blinded and perhaps not discover tools that would be good in our own practice. So I'm starting to do that more. We moved right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was so difficult. You couldn't meet people, and we live on acreage now. So it's been a little bit of a journey finally getting to meet neighbors and figuring out the landscape where I now live. I didn't drive for almost a year. Getting better about that.
When people come to your classes, what would you recommend that they keep in mind or be aware of?
First of all, have fun. That is number one, is we're here for the fun. And when we learn in that feeling, then I think the joy that we can create brings us far more than if we come in with I've got to learn this today. I've only got so much time. It's relax, have fun, go with the flow.
You design patterns.
Not so much, but I do have one in mind that I would love to make into a pattern. Yep, it's called Test Pattern, and I believe it's on my website. It's a cat sitting on a TV screen. So I dearly love that piece, and I think it would lend itself to working into a pattern.
Is there a particular cloth or fabric that you prefer to work with?
Yes, I like to work in all cotton, 100% cotton. That it has a little bit tighter weave, close to a batik. I know how it takes the dye. I know how it reacts. I know how it behaves. So when I take that sort of more tightly woven fabric and try and marry it with something that is more loosely woven, I kind of run into some difficulty at times. But I tend to work in this one particular fabric. Sorry about that. Life happens.
I spoke with an artist recently, and one of the grievances she brought to me and the public was that the supplies, materials are getting more and more expensive.
Yes,
Do you experience the same thing?
absolutely. Absolutely. But that being said, being a quilter for 40 years, I have a massive supply. So I'm not purchasing very many supplies at this point. I'm trying to really use what I have. And when I go to teach classes, I bring large bags of scraps and say, please bring these home and use them in your own artwork because I don't want them to go to waste. If I've got pretty small scraps, I'll contact a local school and donate them for the children to paste up or make something out of. And the schools very much appreciate that because it's ready-made collage work. Some of them are very interesting shapes, or the children will like the different color combinations. So nothing goes to waste.
Another artist mentioned to me that she even goes to thrift shops to look for materials. Do you do that?
I do that, yes. My original tree rings, that's where I got some of the old military uniforms, just as an example. And if you can buy a shirt for 25 cents or anything that will go into your piece, they can be very welcoming in a lot of the different styles of art that I do. And it would often be stuff that I may not be able to find in a store, something, for example, shiny or that looks like snake skin. Both of those come to mind. I will use what looks like the Teflon that comes off an ironing board. That goes into different pieces. It's a very rich environment to find a lot of yummy things that you wouldn't necessarily typically look for or be able to source. Yeah.
What is your largest piece? How big it is?
It's about 80 by 80. Yeah. And it's got two battings in it. It went on display through a Nancy Crow exhibition a number of years ago. Yeah, it's a very heavy piece.
You have a workshop coming on the 22nd of February.
Yes. And I'll be teaching, I'll do my lecture first that morning and then teaching the tree rings workshop throughout the day. Yeah. And quite a number of workshops throughout the summer into the fall. Several next year are scheduled in 2026. 2026 is hard to think about just because we're at the beginning of 2025.
If someone wants to learn quilting, is there a book they could start with?
Oh, I have to go back to beginner's mind to think about that. There are a lot of good books and a lot of very good YouTubes. So if you're a visual learner, I tend to look at the YouTubes for beginning quilters and a lot of wonderful teachers. So if you're in an urban setting, if you have a local quilt shop, they will almost always offer a beginning workshop. So I would tend to start there and support my local quilt shop.
How do you maintain your quilts? Because you've done quilts for decades. I'm assuming you still have quilts from 40 years ago.
I do, actually. I tend to roll my art quilts up on a pool noodle, put them in a cloth bag that I've made, and store them in a specially made closet with a lot of different shelves. And I've finally had to learn that I need to tag them on what's in that bag so that I'm not continuously searching for something that's at the bottom of the pile, that it's a little bit more organized.
You've been approached by museums or other organizations to restore damaged quilts.
That's a great question. I have not, and I don't really have that in my skill set. So I don't. I do work with the Rocky Mountain Quilt Museum closely. Very lovely people. And they, I would say, like your quilt museums or quilt studies groups. They're much more the experts than I am in a restoration project.
You mentioned that you're working on the purple people.
Yes.
Is there another project going on right now?
I usually have several projects going on at one time. For example, my cityscape in back of me. I've got another very large whole cloth piece that I dyed that needs to be quilted. And then when I need to clear my head, I do 4 patches. I have 2.5 inch strips cut from leftover fabrics, and I run them through the machine. So something that I just don't have to think about. It doesn't cost me a lot of brain power.
How do you see the future of quilting?
I think just in the United States alone, I think there are about 30 million quilters with a lot of disposable income. We'll see how that disposable income goes over time. But I see the traditional, and I say that as an honoring, traditional folks staying kind of in that lane if because there's so many good patterns and so much you can do in that world. And then the art quilt folks, then there's the modern quilts. I see it continuing and blowing up, and people really expanding what is in their repertoire because everybody's got a quilt story. If
What would you say is your guiding philosophy?
I'm 66 years old now, and when we get to a certain age, we let go of the drama. So I don't have drama in my life, and I would say that I watch my thoughts because thoughts become reality. I am able to produce works that speak to my heart. So if I make something just to make something, it feels like it doesn't have enough of my heart in it and my passion and the things that I bring into the world. So I try and put that into my artwork, just an awful lot of feeling. I don't paint, I don't crochet, I don't knit, I don't do any other sort of craft. So this is my focus. Um, I would I would also add that being in a community of like-minded people is very critical for artists, for any creative mind. Of course, we won't always agree, but picking each other's brains and just sometimes just being a sounding board or talking about our lives is very, very important. I like to create alone, but I also like to be in community with my work. It's important for me to share it. Well, it won a lovely award at Paducah. My perception of embroider is that it's much more than what I do. So there's machine embroidery, and I don't do that. And then there's a lot of hand embroidery. So I don't do that. But this particular quilt, because it's got thousands of little stitches, it won first place in handwork at QuiltCon, and it won the Judge's Choice from Susan Cleveland at Paducah. So it's very popular and very different. It's just thousands of little seed stitches, so it's not what I consider some beautiful work of embroidery. But it was so boring without the seed stitches that that's what I did when I was watching TV at night for a whole winter. So I got, I thought I'm just going to do around, and when you see this, you'll understand. It's called confetti. I was just going to do around one of these little confetti streamers, and I finished it, and I'm like, shit, it's not enough. So, anyway, that's how that went.